A heavy rain was falling over a quiet European city that night. The streets looked empty and cold under the streetlights. A lone traveler stood in front of an old hotel. The building looked much older than everything around it. Its windows were dim and unevenly lit. The sign above the door flickered slightly in the rain. The traveler hesitated for a moment before stepping inside. The doors opened with a slow wooden creak. Warm air mixed with the smell of old wood and dust. The lobby was almost silent. Only a ticking clock could be heard somewhere in the distance. The wallpaper looked faded, as if it had not been changed for decades. A man stood behind the reception desk. He did not smile when the traveler approached. He looked tired in a way that felt unusual. The traveler asked for a room for the night. The receptionist checked a thick old register. His fingers stopped for a second on one page. He looked up briefly, but said nothing. Then he slowly wrote something down. He handed over a key with a metal tag. The tag had the number 307 engraved on it. For a brief moment his hand seemed to hesitate. The traveler noticed it but said nothing. The receptionist avoided eye contact. He simply pointed toward the staircase. The traveler turned and walked toward the stairs. The wooden steps creaked with every step. The hallway upstairs was dim and long. The lights flickered softly overhead. Room numbers lined the corridor in uneven order. The air felt colder the further he walked. He found room 306 on the left side. He kept walking, expecting to see 307 next. But the next door was marked 308. He stopped and looked back slowly. The corridor behind him looked normal. He checked both sides again carefully. There was no sign of room 307 anywhere. The silence in the hallway felt heavier now. He looked at the key in his hand again. Room 307 was clearly written on it, but the building refused to show it. A strange feeling began to settle in the air. Something about this floor did not feel right, and that was the moment everything started to feel wrong. The traveler stood still in the empty corridor. The silence around him felt heavier than before. He looked again at the doors in front of him. 306 on one side and 308 just ahead. But there was still no sign of 307. He slowly walked back a few steps. His eyes scanned every inch of the wall. The wallpaper looked slightly uneven in one place, as if something had been covered or removed. He touched the wall carefully. It felt normal but strangely hollow in his mind. He checked the key again in his hand. 307 was clearly engraved on the metal tag. He turned toward a passing guest who appeared from a staircase. The guest was carrying a small suitcase. The traveler asked about room 307. The guest stopped for a second and looked confused. He shook his head slowly and said nothing like that exists here. Then he walked past without looking back. The traveler felt a cold unease growing inside him. He returned to the reception desk quickly. The same receptionist was still standing there. His face looked even more tired now. The traveler placed the key on the counter. He asked where room 307 was located. The receptionist paused for a long moment. Then he slowly opened the old register book again. He flipped through pages without speaking. The pages looked worn and yellow. Some pages seemed missing or torn out. Finally, he stopped and closed the book. He said in a low voice that all rooms are accounted for. The traveler insisted that he had been given 307. The receptionist avoided his gaze completely. He simply said, "There is no such room on any floor plan." The words felt strange and final. The traveler returned to the stairs again. This time the hallway felt even quieter. Every step echoed unnaturally. He walked slowly along the corridor once more. 306 was still there, and 308 still followed, but the space between them felt distorted, as if something invisible was hidden in that gap. He stood still, staring at the empty wall again. And then he noticed something new. A faint outline, almost invisible in the paint. A shape that did not match the rest of the wall. It looked like a door that had been sealed completely, and just for a second he thought he heard breathing behind it. The traveler froze in front of the wall. The faint outline seemed clearer the longer he stared. It was not just damage or old paint. It had the exact shape of a door frame, but there was no handle, no lock, nothing to open it. He leaned closer and placed his hand on it. The The wall felt slightly colder than the rest of the corridor. A weak vibration passed through it for a moment. Then everything went silent again. He stepped back slowly, unsure if he imagined it. From somewhere down the hallway came a soft sound. Footsteps, slow and uneven. He turned quickly, but the corridor was empty. The footsteps stopped the moment he looked. The silence returned, deeper than before. He tried to calm himself and exhaled slowly. Then suddenly, a faint knock came from the wall. 3 slow knocks from the hidden outline. He stepped back again, heart beating faster. The wall did not respond again for a moment. Then a thin sound came, like wood shifting inside stone. He looked around, but no one was there. The lights above flickered once and dimmed slightly. For a second, the corridor looked darker than before. He decided to go back to reception again. But when he turned, something had changed. The hallway behind him looked longer than before. Room 306 was farther away than it should have been. And room 308 seemed slightly out of place. As if the corridor had stretched, he walked slowly, confused by the distance. Every step felt heavier than the last. When he finally reached the stairs, they were not where they were before. The staircase had shifted slightly to the right. He looked back again at the corridor. The faint outline on the wall was still there, but now it looked more like a door than before, and the number above it seemed to be forming slowly 307. Not painted, not carved, but appearing like it was remembering itself. From inside the wall, something moved again, and this time it did not feel like it was just sound anymore. The traveler stared at the number 307. It looked unstable, like it was shifting between visibility and nothingness. He stepped closer without realizing it. The wall felt colder with each step he took. A low humming sound began to rise from inside it. Not mechanical, not natural, something in between. He placed his hand near the outline again. This time the surface reacted immediately. A thin crack of light appeared along the edge. The shape of a door was now undeniable. But it was still sealed, as if waiting for permission. Then suddenly, the humming stopped. Complete silence returned. The traveler pulled his hand back quickly, and in that silence, he heard something very clear. His name being whispered from inside the wall. He froze. The voice sounded faint, but unmistakably human. He stepped back, breathing faster now. The corridor behind him felt different again. Longer, darker, heavier. He turned toward the stairs, but they looked farther away. The hotel seemed to be rearranging itself, like it was responding to what he had found behind him. The wall made a soft clicking sound, like a lock slowly releasing. The outline of the door began to deepen into the wall. Wooden texture started appearing where there was only paint before. A faint smell of old dust and closed spaces filled the air. Then, very slowly, the door inside the wall became real. Room 307 was no longer hidden. It existed now, fully formed. The handle appeared last, as if it was waiting for him to look at it. The traveler did not move. Every instinct told him to leave. But the corridor behind him no longer felt like an exit. It felt like a return point. From inside the room, a soft light turned on, and a shadow moved across the floor inside, as if someone had just stood up to greet him. And the door, slightly ajar now, waited silently for him to decide whether to enter. The door to room 307 stood slightly open now. A thin line of warm light spilled into the cold corridor. The traveler did not move at first. He just watched the light flicker gently on the floor. Inside the room, the shadow no longer moved. Everything felt still, but not empty. It felt occupied in a way he could not explain. He took a slow step forward, then another. Each step felt heavier than the last. The air around the doorway felt different. Warmer, but unsettling, like the building was holding its breath. He reached the doorframe. The number 307 above it looked freshly carved now. Not old, not forgotten. New, as if it had just been created. He placed his hand on the door. It felt strangely smooth, almost untouched by time. Then, from inside the room, a soft sound came again. Not a knock this time, but a chair scraping against the floor. The traveler stopped breathing for a moment. The door opened a little more by itself. Inside, the room looked normal at first glance. A bed, a table, a small lamp glowing softly. but everything was covered in a thin layer of dust. Except one place, the bedsheets looked slightly disturbed, as if someone had just stood up from it. On the table, something lay open. A diary. The pages were flipped to the last written entry. The traveler leaned in slowly. Reading the words, the handwriting was uneven and rushed. It described confusion, someone entering the room and realizing they could not find the exit. The last line ended mid-sentence, like the writer stopped in the middle of a thought. The lamp flickered once, the room grew a little brighter, and that was when the traveler noticed something else. There was no mirror in the room, just an empty frame on the wall. As if something had once been there and removed carefully behind him, the corridor felt quieter than ever. Too quiet, like the hotel was no longer waiting. It was watching. The traveler stood inside, room 307 now. The door behind him slowly closed on its own. No sound, just a soft final click. The room felt smaller than it looked from outside. Like the walls had shifted slightly after he entered, he turned back toward the door immediately. The handle was gone. Just a plain wall now, where the exit had been. He rushed forward and pushed it. Nothing moved, not even a sound came back. The silence inside the room felt different from the corridor. He turned slowly and looked around again. The bed, the table, the lamp were all still there. But something had changed. The air felt heavier now, like the room was no longer empty at all. He walked toward the table again. The diary was still open. But now the page had changed. New words had appeared underneath the last line. Fresh ink. Still slightly wet, he had not touched it. He leaned closer, slowly. The new line simply said, "Now you are here." The lamp flickered again, and for a split second, the room looked larger, then smaller again, like it was breathing. He stepped away from the table, and that was when he noticed the sound. Soft breathing, coming from somewhere in the room. Not his own. He turned toward the bed. The sheets were no longer perfectly still. A slight rise and fall could be seen under them, like someone was lying there, watching him without moving. He took a slow step back. The floor creaked. The breathing from the bed stopped instantly. Complete silence returned again. Then very slowly, the sheets shifted. Just a little, as if whatever was under them had turned its head toward him. And from somewhere behind him, a voice whispered again. But this time, it was not calling his. A name. It simply said, "Don't leave yet." The whisper came from right behind him. The traveler turned instantly, but there was nothing there, only the closed room and the silent air. The bed remained slightly disturbed. The lamp kept flickering in slow intervals. He forced himself to stay calm, but his breathing was getting uneven. He looked back toward the bed again. The movement under the sheets had stopped completely, like whatever was there was now listening, waiting for him to react. He stepped sideways carefully, trying not to make any sound. The floor felt softer now, almost like it was absorbing his weight. He glanced at the diary again. The words on the page were unchanged, but the ink looked darker than before, as if it had just been written over and over again. Then something strange happened. The lamp stopped flickering and stayed on constant light. Filled the room for the first time. Everything was clearly visible. Every corner, in every shadow, even the empty mirror frame on the wall. The traveler slowly approached it. There was no glass inside, just a black empty space. But when he looked into it, he did not see himself clearly. Instead, the reflection lagged behind him, moving a second late. He stepped back quickly, and the reflection did something different. It stayed still. While he moved, he froze. The reflection inside the empty frame slowly turned its head, even though he was not moving anymore, and it smiled. Not him, something else wearing his shape. Behind him, the bed creaked again, this time louder. The sheets slowly lifted from inside, as if something was sitting up. The traveler did not dare to turn. The voice returned again. Very close now, almost inside the room itself. You opened it. The lamp flickered once and went dim. The room felt larger again, but colder this time. And from the bed, a slow movement began again. Closer than before, right behind him, the traveler didn't move at all. Even breathing felt dangerous now. The room was completely dark, except for a faint glow from the lamp. barely holding on. Behind him, the bed kept shifting slowly, like something was adjusting itself to sit properly. Then the movement stopped. A long silence followed. Too long. The traveler slowly took one step to the side, carefully, without turning his head. The floor creaked softly under him. The moment he moved, the lamp flickered again, and in that brief flash of light he saw it. The shape sitting on the bed was upright now, but it was not fully visible, like the room refused to show it completely, only a silhouette. Human, but wrong in proportion, still too aware. Then a voice came again, not behind him this time, from everywhere inside the room. "You were not the first." The traveler finally turned his head slightly, and the bed was empty. No figure, no movement, just perfectly straight sheets, as if nothing had ever been there. He looked at the mirror frame again. The reflection was gone now, only darkness inside it. But the darkness felt deeper than before, like it had distance inside it. He stepped backward slowly, trying to find the door again, but the wall behind him had changed. There was no door, no handle, no outline, just solid wall. The room had sealed itself completely. Then the diary on the table flipped by itself, page after page, turning rapidly, stopping on a new page. Fresh writing appeared instantly, like someone was writing it in real time. It said, "He is awake. I now..." The lamp flickered violently, once, twice, and then stopped completely. Total darkness filled room 307. And in that darkness, something finally moved very close to him. But this time, it was not on the bed anymore. The traveler stood completely still in the darkness. He could feel the air changing around him, not moving normally anymore, but shifting in slow, deliberate waves. Something was now inside the room with him. Not far, very close. He did not dare to reach for anything. Even his own thoughts felt loud. Then a soft sound came again, like fabric brushing against wood. But there was no wind, no open window. The diary on the table suddenly slammed shut by itself. The sound echoed too loudly in the sealed room. Then silence returned immediately after. The traveler took a slow step backward. His back touched the wall, but the wall felt different now. It was warm, like something alive behind it. A breath slowly passed through the surface. He froze completely. Then a voice spoke again, right beside his ear, calm and close. "You are inside now." He turned sharply, but there was nothing there, only darkness pressing in from all sides. The floor beneath him creaked once, as if something shifted position directly under him. He stepped forward quickly, trying to find space to move. But the room felt smaller again. Closing in, the air became heavier with every second. Then suddenly the lamp flickered back on, very weak, barely lighting the room. And in that dim light, the traveler saw something impossible. The bed was no longer empty. There were footprints forming on the dust, moving toward him slowly, as if something invisible was walking directly in his direction. Step by step, and behind him, the mirror frame finally showed something again. A reflection that was not his, standing right behind him now. The traveler did not move when he saw the reflection, because the reflection was already too close to react. It stood directly behind him in the mirror frame, even though he felt nothing behind him in the room. The contradiction made his mind go blank for a second. Then the on footprints on the floor stopped moving right in front of him, less than a step away. The air became completely still. The lamp flickered once and stayed dim. The traveler slowly lowered his eyes toward the floor. Nothing was visible anymore, but he could feel presence everywhere, like the room itself had become aware of him. Then a sound came from the diary again. Pages turning slowly this time, not fast like before, carefully, deliberately. He did not look. He already knew something new would be written. And then it stopped. Silence returned, followed by one single sentence, spoken from nowhere. "You should have stayed outside." The traveler finally moved a quick step backward toward the wall, but there was no wall anymore, only open space behind him. Cold air rushing in. He turned sharply and realized something impossible. The room had expanded again. It was longer a normal hotel room. It stretched farther than the eye could see. Darkness replaced the far corners. like the room had no boundaries left. The bed was now far away, the table barely visible, and the mirror frame looked smaller, as if he himself had shrunk inside it. Then, from the darkness ahead, a figure finally became visible, standing where the bed used to be, not fully formed, but no longer hidden. It took a slow step forward, and the traveler realized something terrifying. It was learning his movements, copying them, but not perfectly, almost like it was still becoming him. And from behind him, another step echoed closer than before, as if the room now had more than one direction to fear, and none of them led out anymore.